In single-player games, and even co-op multiplayer games, you can finally craft the experience and the pacing of that experience.
Half-Life 2.
If there is an intense combat section, you can follow it up with some puzzle solving, platforming, or exploration, making sure there's downtime in between the highs of the game. You can keep story elements in small digestible parts that have low points to better emphasize the highs. But in multiplayer games, there's none of that. Other people won't follow all of your perfected timing. So knowing this, trying to pace multiplayer games with adequate downtime and intense rushes may seem like an absolute impossible task. However, with some clever game design and a bit of luck, it can and has been done. So first of all, why do you even want pacing in multiplayer shooters in the first place? The short answer is that brains develop a tolerance to stimulation. As a comparison, think of a treat like cake. If you have cake every few months, it's awesome, but if you have cake every fucking day, suddenly it becomes very boring and can taste worse to you.
I would not wrap my own bottom with this!
If you want a more metal example, you can replace cake with heroin. Pacing also helps create tension in downtime, which can lead to far more satisfying firefights and victories. So how on earth do you even create pacing within multiplayer games? Well, thankfully, we don't actually have to beat our heads against the pavement trying to come up with the answer, because game designers already have. The first tool in the game design arsenal that applies to all games is the game mode and map layout. Let it be known here and now that Free-for-All, King of the Hill, and Team Deathmatch are the 3 worst game modes for pacing. This is also why the games or rounds in these game modes are relatively short. In most games, they're a constant high that, although fun, can leave you seriously burnt out if the game drags on for longer than several minutes. Especially with the super speedy, fast-paced games. Now with game modes like Attack Defend, Payload, Siege, Bomb Defusal, maybe even a little Escort depending on the game, these game modes give ample room for maps to manipulate the highs and lows of the game, through the use of things like choke points, defensive positions, etc. A defending team could be holding a choke for a really long time until the attacking team finally bursts through, maybe from a coordinated push or through constant trades or picks or even just from enough spam. And from busting through a defensive hold, a rush is made on both teams. Something the more astute of you will notice about all the better paced game modes I listed is that there's always an attacking team and a defending team. This is key for a 2-team based game mode if the map creator wants to be able to manipulate the pacing of the game, which entails bettering the experience for the player. Another important part of the game mode is respawn times, or if you respawn at all. Elimination game modes like Bomb Defusal, Search and Destroy, whatever, create both tension and downtime after you die, which is always right after a firefight. Unless of course you take fall damage and die like me.
Are you just dumb or are you full-blown retarded?
They are very well paced, especially in games such as CSGO and similar, where there's time at the start of rounds for the counter-terrorist to buy supplies and set up a defensive hold, and time for the terrorist to buy supplies and plan an attack strategy.
Alright, you guys rush B and then I'll smoke and fake A, okay?
But in the game modes where you do respawn, it can be quite deliberate. Ironically, I especially like when games require you to walk back to the fight, creating downtime right after the high of getting in a fight where you likely died, and also creating tension as you slowly, ever so slowly walk back. It may seem annoying, but it actually does help enhance the experience, or more specifically, enhance the highs you get in your experience. Or if there's no walk back, you could just make the respawn times a trillion seconds like the red team in TF2. This of course gets more complicated with teleporters and movement options, but you get the general gist. Now I haven't actually told you what the best paced video game mode is yet. Battle Royale. Battle Royale has incredible pacing. Its whole purpose for existing is to create downtime in between firefights, and to increase tension the less and less players there are. The average pace of a Battle Royale game rivals that of your average work of literature or film, and it's a fucking multiplayer shooter experience. As soon as you land, you're immediately trying to scavenge for weapons, working towards that final climax. The tension is constantly rising while still having highs and lows. It's genius. And also literally the main advantage advantage of the game mode. Pacing is the reason for the success of Battle Royale. Every game you play in Battle Royale has its own story, and every act of scavenging and firefighting is a high and low scene in the story until the climax, at your outstanding victory against the odds of dozens of players, or your demise like me. That can be considered a bad ending of a work of literature. But that's certainly enough of me gushing over Battle Royale. Game mode and map design can't be the only way to help nudge pacing in the right direction. There are more individual methods as well. For example, special abilities and ultimates exist as a way to create highs in the face of more mundane gameplay. As a classic example, let's see what the original TF2 developers had to say about the Uber charge.
Invulnerability adds an element of pacing to the multiplayer experience, which otherwise tends to have fewer emotional highs and lows than a well-crafted single-player game. When an invulnerable medic and his friends come running in, it's an extreme high point for them. It's also a rush for the defenders, who know that they've just got to hold on for 10 seconds until invulnerability fades. Invulnerability also sharpens pacing by helping a team push through a defensive stalemate when the enemy team turtles up and refuses to come out of their base. Without a lack of defensive skirmishers, it's easier for the offense to build up the invulnerability charge without interruption.
Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense. It also seems like their work paid off because in TF2, the medic is the most influential character in the game. So much so that even getting a medic pick as someone on the other team can create a somewhat high for that player that killed the medic.
Come to daddy!
Following this design principle, ultimate abilities have been a more and more common occurrence in recent game titles. It seems like every character in every game nowadays needs to have some sort of special ability. Now let me ask you, is the purpose of adding special abilities to every character to balance the game? No, of course it isn't. It's so much harder to balance a game when every single character has a different and unique special ability. Its whole purpose is to create a rush, a high for the player. However, with ultimates that have a timer, the game developers can specify how often they want that high of the ultimate to take place, making it a far safer option for pacing than say the Uber charge, or just not having abilities at all and hoping for the team fights and pushes to pace every player along. There are some alternative ways of creating good pacing in multiplayer games. You could just make the game a constant high but keep rounds relatively short. Or you could make maps extremely spread out so that even in game modes like Team Deathmatch, downtime is almost unavoidable. Ammo and making reloads longer than 1 second are also other ways of forcing players to get away from the highs of combat and seek shelter or ammo. Simple little design choices like that seem to be just for balance can help play a minor role in the delicate pacing in multiplayer games. Now yes, you're absolutely right, these are all just guidelines, but the importance of pacing shouldn't be understated. TF2 still has an active player base after being 14 years old. Now the success of TF2 isn't just derived from the pacing of the game, but when even the devs make special care to make sure the pacing of the game is just right, I think it's high time us players start to notice, which is why I made this video in the first place. Now we as players can hopefully notice, appreciate, and even critique the pacing of multiplayer shooters. I'm not a game developer. I like to tinker around in Unity and program dumb games when I can, but when it comes to the shooters with hundreds of thousands of players, I'm just a humble player like everyone else, looking to appreciate and critique game design.
Critical hits are one of the features that resulted from our focus on pacing. The critical hit system attempts to slightly influence the highs and lows of the game by increasing the chance of a critical hit based upon the player's recent performance. In summary, the better you're doing, the more likely you'll continue to do well. This helps create those rare high moments where a single player goes on a rampage and gets 3 or 4 kills in rapid succession.